Today we'll begin Chapter 4, which is Problem Solving with Fractions. We'll start with an introduction to fractions. So in this chapter, we'll begin to work with fractions. A fractions tells us how many parts of a whole we have. It's made up of a numerator and a denominator. The numerator tells us how many parts, and the denominator tells us the total number of parts. The numerator is always in the top of the fraction. The denominator is in the bottom of the fraction. Some examples of fractions are 1/2, 5/8, -20/27, 10/7, 9/9, and 15/11. There are two types of fractions, proper and improper. A proper fraction is when the numerator is less than the denominator. The value of a proper fraction is less than 1. Some examples are 1/2, 5/8, -20/27. An improper fraction is when the numerator is equal to or greater than the denominator. The value of an improper fraction is greater than or equal to 1. Some examples are 10/7, 9/9, and 15/11. A fraction that has an integer numerator and a non-zero denominator is called a rational number. A rational number is defined as a number that can be written in the form a/b, where a and b are integers and b is not 0. Every integer is a rational number since any integer a can be written in the form a/1. Since we cannot divide by 0, and a fraction is another way to represent a division problem, the denominator of a fraction can never be 0. The value of the fraction is undefined. So the value of 4/0 equals undefined. But since we can divide a number into 0, the value of a fraction with a numerator of 0 is 0. An example, 0/6 equals 0. Equivalent fractions are fractions that represent the same quantity. In our example, the circle on the left is divided into halves, and we have half of it shaded in. The circle on the right is divided into fourths, and 2 of the fourths are shaded in, and you can see that the amount of shaded in is the same. So 1/2 and 2/4 are equivalent fractions. To write an equivalent fraction, multiply or divide the numerator and the denominator by the same non-zero number. So to define an equivalent fraction for 3/4, we can multiply the numerator and the denominator by 2, and we get 6/8. We can also multiply the numerator and the denominator by 3, and we get 9/12. We can multiply 3/4 by 4/4, and we get 12/16. 6/8, 9/12, and 12/16 are all equivalent fractions to 3/4. The opposite of writing equivalent fractions, where we multiply the numerator and the denominator by the same number, is to reduce a fraction to lowest terms. A fraction is in lowest terms when the common factor between the numerator and the denominator is 1. Some examples are 1/3, 4/7, and 12/25. These are fractions all in lowest terms. The greatest common factor, or GCF, of two numbers is the largest factor common to both numbers. For example, the greatest common factor of 8 and 12 is 4. To reduce a fraction to lowest terms, we divide the numerator and denominator by the greatest common factor. For example, we want to find the greatest common factor between 20 and 35. To do that, we write out the factors of each number. The factors of 20 are 1, 2, 4, 5, and 10. The factors of 35 are 1, 5, 7, and 35. The factor they have in common, or the greatest one, is the number 5. So we divide the numerator and denominator by 5. So 20 divided by 5 is 4, and 35 divided by 5 is 7. So 20 over 35, written in lowest terms, is 4 over 7. In order to compare fractions, and as you will see later, to add and subtract fractions, you need a common denominator. A common denominator of two or more fractions is a number that is a multiple of each denominator. The multiples of a number are found by multiplying the number by 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Please do not confuse multiples with factors. For example, the multiples of 6 are 6 times 1, 6 times 2, 6 times 3, 6 times 4, etc. In other words, they are 1, 12, 13, 24, 30, 36, continuing on. The least common denominator, or LCM, of two fractions is the least common denominator to both denominators. The LCD of 3/4 and 5/6 is 12. To find the lowest common denominator, identify the largest denominator and find the largest multiple that both denominators have in common. It may be one of the denominators or a product of the denominators. For example, to find the lowest common denominator of 1/6 and 3/8, we list the multiples of each denominator. 6 is 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36. The multiples of 8 are 8, 16, 24, 32, 40. Since the lowest common multiple is 24, the lowest common denominator of 1/6 and 3/8 is 24. To compare the fractions to see which one is larger, you need to write each fraction as an equivalent fraction using the common denominator. You must multiply the numerator by the same factor that you multiplied the denominator by to get the common denominator. So, for example, which is larger, 3/8 or 1/3? We start by writing out the multiples of each denominator. 8, the multiples are 8, 16, 24, 32, 40. The multiples of 3 are 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, 27. We see that they both have 24 in common, so the lowest common denominator is 24. Now write the equivalent fractions using the denominator of 24. To write the fraction of 3/8 with the denominator of 24, you multiply the numerator by 3, since that's what we multiplied the denominator by to get 24. And 3 times 3 is 9. So 3/8 written as a equivalent fraction with the denominator of 24 is 9/24. 1/3, we multiply the numerator by 8, since we multiplied the denominator by 8 to get 24. So the built-up fraction of 1/3 with a denominator of 24 is equal to 8 over 24. So which is larger, 9 over 24 or 8 over 24? The fraction with the largest numerator is the larger fraction, so the largest fraction is 9 over 24.